Good morning, everybody. Hatice Sozer from Istanbul Technical University. Actually, today I am going to this presentation with my co-worker on this project with Dr. Seyfi Bekele. I'm from Istanbul, so we have done this study for Istanbul. If anybody here in the audience are familiar with Istanbul, you may know that the construction development, especially in high-rise development, are blooming in Istanbul. So we have done this study to find out this high-rise effect on microclimate, especially in a district called Maslak in Istanbul. Okay, this is the highlight view of Istanbul. I put the highlight view in a purpose because I didn't want to make you scared in my first slide with the traffic jam in Istanbul. So, and also it looks very nice at night. So this is all these buildings you see along with this highway. All these high-rise buildings are being built in last 10 years. And city planning and building design, architectural building design, plays major role on energy efficiency and creating energy efficient and healthy living environment, especially in the city living. And for Istanbul, energy efficiency in the building and also creating healthy living environment becoming very important issues. This is the site where we have done our studies, and this is the Bosphorus Bridge. This is the North Black Sea region, and you see the two bridges also on the being built on the Bosphorus here. This is our site, and starting from 1950s, all these developments, especially in the cities, urban growth, becoming very plays major role and becoming very fast, and also it has effect on the industrialization process. And since the 1950s, the cities urban growth and they start transformed, and also city constantly start renew and adjust the new society which lives in the city. And big cities like Istanbul, it's very complex. It has very complex scheme, and because of this kind of high demand and growth structure. And after 1980s, with the growth of all this service sector in the world and also in Istanbul, and also all this development in telecommunication. And as I showed you in my previous slide, all construction on the two bridges, and also construction of the highways in and around the city. Start creating multi-centers in the city. So this Maslak becoming one of these the center, especially in business center in Istanbul. And this is the highway passing through it. And if you are familiar, this is the Istanbul Technical University site, which is the biggest university right now. It has the biggest land actually for the university in Turkey now. And this is our site, and also you have seen the image from this site, along with this road. And all these buildings you see here are being built in next 10 years, and this is the scene from this road, and you see the site for Technical University. And these are all newly developed building. And you see the master plan of the site that we have been working on it. And you see that since last 20 years, this master plan being revised almost 4 times because of this demand and growth of the city. And here you see the height of the buildings, and you see clearly in the image that most of these buildings are office and mixed use, and these are the residential, the buildings that stand behind the highways. And it's especially on this site, they are more than 90 meters. They have more than 90 meters height. And these are the legend of the years that they being built, and you see that all this high rise around it, it's started to being built after 2000. And so this is our site that these are the buildings that we have done our study, and Dr. Seyfi Bekele is going to show now the measurements that he has done on this site. Thank you.
Right. I mean, the last 2 days in the Congress, we have seen that how fast, the urbanization is growing in different parts of the world. And this urbanization involves, high-rise buildings. And the reason for high-rise buildings, it can be out of necessity, or it can be, a sign of modernization. But whatever the reason of this urbanization is going to be, high-rise towers is going to affect the microclimate. This change in the microclimate involves, when we have high-rise towers, we are changing the nature of the surface. It can be, before it's only, vegetations. Now we are going to have high-rise towers. Or it can be, low-rise towers. And it also involves, the material, what we are using, is also affects the microclimate. The shape of the tower. Well, there are, the different motivations when we are having, designing the shape of the towers, from tower planning aspects or from the individual towers aspect. We decide, what kind of shapes we have to have. And also the density of the towers plays a role. If we have too much dense, then we can't have the wind to penetrate through. Also, we have to study the orientation. It's very important aspect that the orientation of the towers or the buildings in respect to the wind direction is important. The spacing between buildings plays important thing. When we are bringing, a lot of people in one place, there will be traffic, and that will be contributing to thermal build-up and pollutions. And also there is man-made heat. So all this add up and is going to change to affect the microclimate of the surrounding. Well, our objective is, is to study this area and to find out what is the effects of these high-rise towers. First part is in terms of air movement, and then what is the thermal performance under the solar load. First, what we have to study is we have to look the climate. The important climate parameters what we have to look is the first one is the temperature. When we have, high-rise towers, we are going not to have, the same kind of temperature what we have before. We know about the heat island effect. And when there is a change in temperature, then we are going to affect the humidity too. The wind speed, how it looks like, the profile of the wind when it is an open land or in a suburban region, and when we have, a built-up city, the profile is different. What we are expecting at the ground level is completely different. So we have to look, how it's affected the shape, the density on the wind speed, and the directionality too. We may have the directionality from the meteorological station a certain direction, but when we are having it directly in the city, it would be different from what's reported in the station. And all of these climate parameters change in time, daily, monthly, will be important for the microclimate study. And also their changes, their variation due to different direction is also important. For this study, what we have done is first we looked what is the climate before having most of the buildings, the high-rise developments are built between 1997 2001, and the other is after it's built between 2006 and 2010. Well, the data what we have is from the airport. And because it's from the airport, it can't tell the whole story, what's happening in the city. And what we have seen is in some months, there is an increase in temperature, but in some months, no, it's not. So even though we looked at, the 5-year data before and after every month, we can't have, a very conclusive to say that because of the origin of the data. Well, now we went ahead and looked at the components, different components of wind for the area, the 5 years data from 2005 to 2010. And here which we are seeing is humidity. And when we are looking the humidity that between, early morning, the plots are for summer and for winter. And in early morning, there is no much difference between the summer humidity and the winter humidity. But at midday, it's low humidity in summer, and winter humidity is almost constant. So here is the time from midnight to 11. When we look the temperature plots, this is an average temperature for the summer and winter time. There is a little bit variation in the winter temperature, and there is almost around 4 degrees difference between nighttime and daytime temperature difference. So there is no, big variations because I am from Australia and Melbourne, and in a day you will see a big variation, okay, let alone in a day. Actually in a few hours you will see big difference. But when we are looking the temperature in this area, it is not that much big difference. When we are looking the wind speed variation in a day, this is a mean wind speed. You'll see that the winter wind is not that much strong, but the summer wind is particular in the early morning. It is low, but it picks up during the daytime. So there is substantial difference in the early morning and midday the wind speed. Now we looked the directionality of the wind, how it looks like for the summer wind. And we see that in the summer almost north is 38%, north is 21%, and north is 17%. It's almost the northern sector it's coming. And when you look the winter one, it is 26 north, 16, and there is a southwest, 18. So the north in the summer and winter, it is important. And when we look, the spring wind is also north is very important with some southwest. And in fall, it's also the north is important with some southwest. You have seen, how the geography of the area is, and that tells, why it has this directionality. Okay, then what we did is we plotted all this data in my psychrometric chart. When we plot in psychrometric chart, it tells us, how does it looks like. So here, what I have is in December. It's in the cold time, and what in the middle is the ASHRAE indoor comfort actually, and it is colored by the directionality of the wind. Okay. And you can see that it's mostly the wind which is coming from the north is colder, and the one which is the southwest, it is from the northwest. It is. And what we can see is that as designers in the microclimate, what we wanted is to pull this farther up. That means we need less wind. If we have more wind, what we feel is it feels really cold. So in terms of comfort, in winter, we don't want to have wind in outside area unless for the pollution dispersion. When we look the June data and plot it in psychrometric chart, we see that it is almost, comfortable, a little bit, up. And in here is also it's the same thing. Less wind, it pulls it to higher. And if we have more wind, it pulls it down. That means in the summer, we want to have more wind. That means we want to push it to more comfort. So this tells us, how it looks like, the region wind. Then we used, CFD simulation, to find out. This is, the setup which we have, a simplified building geometry. We used, second order approximation, and what we use inlet boundary condition, which is like the wind is approaching from suburban one. And then from this simulation, what we found out is that, okay, the wind is coming from the northeast. It's accelerating between the buildings. That's happening, and there is some low wind speed regions. So even though there are some high-rise towers in the simulation, what we used is there are, few buildings which have high-rise, but we ignored, those are low-rise buildings. And when we are plotting here, we plotted also the one on the building's face is the pressure. And when we are looking, the pressure is from natural ventilation point of view, how is the pressure distributed around the buildings is very important for natural ventilation. When the wind is blowing from here, that is a positive region, and we want to have, the negative at the back. And how strong we can have is also, a function of the shape of the building. And we looked at, the southwest wind, and the same thing. This is plotted on pressure. We have, positive pressure. The red one is positive pressure, and at the back is negative. And we can see, high wind, which is due to channeling, and there are some low wind speed areas. What we thought is, okay, this is what I have. If I turn around 180 degrees, some of the areas, how does it look like in performance in accelerating the flow? We can see that there is, a change in the wind speed in this area, especially if we look at them together before and after. There are, in this area, how it is, and after it's different. So by changing, the directionality, we can change, the distribution of the wind. The other thing which we have seen is that having a plantation will change. And this is the measurement which we took for another project, is we use a thermographic camera and see what is the difference between the tree and the pavement. And when the tree is 42 degrees centigrade, the pavement was at 56. And when the tree at night time, 31, is 28. So there is a big difference between the trees and the pavement. Having that means encourage, the heat transfer. So we go back and used, the CFD simulation. We used a simplified building geometry. Same thing. In previous one, we used steady state, but in this one, we used unsteady state. Because we want to travel in time, we want to have, a solar load. And what is the effect of the solar load on the thermal performance of the high-speed? So what we have is two configurations. One is, these are the trees which we put in our simulation, and we put the one without the tree. We specified what kind of materials which we have, that is concrete and glass, and we have the roads, which is asphalt and grass, and the other one similarly, we specify the same thing without trees. Okay, the simulation at a temperature at 9 a.m. What we can see is that the red is very hot. This is without trees. This area is hot, but this is colder. This is because of the shade. So the shading contribution, which we see that it is cooler in this area. And with trees, it's the same thing, actually. The main contributor in cooling down is the shading. And in this area, which is warmer, but where we have trees, there is, it's cooler. When we are having trees, we want to, it reduces, the wind speed. In the first psychometric chart I showed you, in some areas we want to increase the wind to have more ventilation. In some areas we want to decrease it. The way we are designing different areas for different climates should be different. When I'm designing for Hong Kong, it should be, my main aim is to have more winds to cool people down. But in this area, there is some heating is required. That means in the winter time, I want to have the shielding, not to have, because it makes people really uncomfortable. So the trees in some area here is stopping is necessary for winter winds. Okay, when we look at the temperature at noon, it's the shading is contributing, lessing the temperature. The trees have, smaller effect because of their size. You can't see, at 3 p.m. it's also, the shading, which gives the trees have, some effect. And if we magnify and see how the trees are much at lower temperature than the pavement. That means it encourages, a lot of heat exchange. In conclusion, that we can say that having, a design, an effective design, which is having the shape, different, the orientation, it will improve, the air movement. In this study, we found, 10 to 15%. And also consideration of the different angles, it also improves because of open space 20 to 25%. Using CFD is important for this study. Actually, in the first presentation, it is said, the pedestrian wind is done in CFD. For this, when you have a unidirectionality, this is north and southwest, it's easy to implement it in CFD. But when you have a lot of directions, it's easier to do it in a wind tunnel than CFD, because there are a lot of things which you have to change, and it's not as easy as it looks, to do it in CFD. Of course, there is, development in computer that plays, and also to calculate the thermal effect. This is the only way, the CFD. So it's an important tool for some of the things which we are doing. So changing the orientation of the link can improve the air movement. Shading is unimportant, as you can see. Plantation increases the heat transfer and can be used to flow control. Thank you.